Hello, curious minds. Mr. Curious here, back with another video. So make sure to sit back and relax. Maybe grab a snack or two. And with that said, I'll let my assistant take it from here.
Have you ever met someone and felt drawn to them almost immediately? Not love, not even affection, just a strange sense of interest, a feeling that made you want to know more. Maybe it was someone at school, someone at work, a stranger you passed more than once, or someone who, for reasons you couldn't explain, seemed different from everyone else around them. And if you've ever experienced that feeling, you've probably asked yourself the same question most people do. Why them? Out of all the people you've seen, spoken to, or walked past, why did your attention settle on that particular person? Most of us like to believe we know the answer. We say things like, they're my type. I just like their personality. There was something about them. But the truth is, attraction is far more complicated than most people realize. Because attraction doesn't begin with logic. It begins long before logic has a chance to get involved. One of the strangest things about attraction is how quickly it can happen. Sometimes all it takes is a few seconds. A glance, a conversation, a smile, and suddenly your brain starts paying special attention to someone. You notice when they enter a room. You notice when they leave. You remember things they said. You think about interactions long after they've ended. Yet, if someone asked you to explain exactly why this person stood out, many people would struggle to give a clear answer. And that's because attraction often feels like a conscious decision. But it rarely starts that way. Psychologists have spent decades studying attraction. And what they discovered is surprisingly uncomfortable. Many of the things we believe are personal preferences are actually influenced by psychological patterns that affect almost everyone. Patterns that operate quietly in the background, without our permission, without our awareness. And sometimes, without us even realizing they're there, the person you find attractive may feel like a completely unique choice. But the forces that shape that attraction are often remarkably predictable. Think about it. Have you ever developed a crush on someone before truly knowing them? Not knowing their values, not knowing their habits, not knowing how they treat other people, not knowing what they're really like when nobody's watching? Yet somehow, despite knowing almost nothing about them, your brain had already started constructing an image that felt real, an image that felt convincing, an image that made you believe you knew more about them than you actually did. This happens because attraction isn't just about seeing another person. It's about interpreting them, and sometimes those interpretations have very little to do with reality. When we're attracted to someone, we don't simply observe them. We begin filling in the blanks. We assume things. We imagine things. We create stories. A confident person becomes intelligent. A beautiful person becomes kind. A mysterious person becomes interesting. A quiet person becomes deep. Without realizing it, we start building an entire character out of a handful of observations. And once that process begins, attraction becomes less about who the other person is and more about the story we're telling ourselves about them. This is one of the reasons attraction can feel so powerful, because we're not only reacting to reality, we're reacting to possibility, to imagination, to potential, to who we think someone might be. And sometimes the person we're attracted to exists more clearly inside our head than they do in real life. That's why people occasionally lose interest the moment they get to know someone better. Not because the other person changed, but because reality finally replaced imagination. The strange thing is that attraction often feels deeply personal. We talk about chemistry, fate, soulmates, the idea that certain people simply click. And while there may be truth to some of those experiences, psychology suggests that attraction is often built from smaller, simpler mechanisms working together. Mechanisms that are so common we barely notice them. The way familiarity affects preference. The way similarity creates comfort, the way confidence influences perception, the way beauty alters judgment, the way uncertainty keeps our attention locked onto someone. None of these things feel obvious when they're happening, but together they create the experience we call attraction. And that's what makes attraction so fascinating. It's one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. It can influence our decisions, our emotions, our priorities, even our perception of reality. Yet most people spend their entire lives experiencing attraction without ever understanding how it works. They simply feel it, follow it, and trust it. But attraction is not magic. It isn't random, and it isn't always a reliable guide. The more we understand the psychology behind attraction, the easier it becomes to separate genuine connection from illusion. And that begins with one of the most powerful forces shaping attraction, a force so common that most people never notice it at all: familiarity. One of the strangest things about attraction is that sometimes the more we see something, the more we begin to like it. Not because it changed, not because it became better, but because our brain started recognizing it. This is one of the simplest and most powerful principles behind attraction. Familiar things feel safer. Think about someone you see regularly, maybe a classmate, a coworker, someone who takes the same train as you. At first, they might be completely ordinary, just another person in the background. You don't think about them, you don't notice them. But then something changes. You see them again and again and again. Eventually, your brain starts marking them as familiar. Their face becomes recognizable, their presence becomes expected, and without realizing it, they begin to feel more comfortable. Psychologists call this the mere exposure effect. The idea is simple. The more often we are exposed to something, the more likely we are to develop a preference for it. This doesn't only apply to people. It happens with music, food, places, brands, even ideas. A song you dislike at first can slowly become your favorite after hearing it enough times. A place that feels unfamiliar can eventually feel like home, and people are no different. This is why attraction sometimes develops slowly. A person doesn't always enter your life and immediately feel special. Sometimes they become special because they slowly become part of your world. You start noticing small things: the way they laugh, the way they speak, the little habits they have. Things that were invisible before suddenly become meaningful, not because the person changed, but because your brain started paying attention. This also explains why many relationships begin in ordinary places: school, work, friend groups, shared communities, places where people repeatedly interact. Because repeated interaction creates opportunities. The more chances we have to observe someone, the more information our brain collects. And the more information we collect, the less uncertain that person feels. And uncertainty is something the human brain naturally dislikes. A stranger is unpredictable. You don't know their personality, you don't know their intentions, you don't know how they will respond. But someone familiar feels easier to understand. Your brain has already built a pattern. It knows what to expect. And that feeling of predictability can become comforting. However, familiarity can also create an illusion. Just because someone feels familiar doesn't always mean you truly know them. You can see someone every day and still know almost nothing about them. You might be attracted to their appearance, the version of them you see, the role they play in your life, rather than who they actually are. This is why some crushes are so powerful from a distance. You see someone repeatedly, you become comfortable with their presence, your brain starts filling in the gaps, and slowly a simple person becomes someone important in your mind, even if you have barely spoken. But familiarity alone is not enough. Seeing someone often can create interest, but it doesn't automatically create a deep connection, because attraction needs something else, a feeling that goes beyond "I've seen you before." It needs "I understand you." And that's where another powerful part of attraction begins. Not familiarity, but similarity. One of the biggest misconceptions about attraction is that we are simply attracted to another person, their face, their personality, their presence. But sometimes we are attracted to the parts of ourselves that we recognize in someone else, because humans naturally search for familiarity. Not just familiar faces, but familiar ideas, familiar experiences, familiar ways of thinking. And when we find those things in another person, it can create a powerful feeling of connection. Think about a conversation where you suddenly realize, wait, you think that too? Maybe it's an opinion, a hobby, a childhood experience, a way of looking at life, and suddenly the other person feels different. Not because they changed, but because you discovered something that connects the two of you. A small similarity can create a feeling of being understood, and being understood is one of the strongest emotional experiences humans have. This is why similarity plays such an important role in attraction. We are often drawn to people who share our values, our interests, our sense of humor, our goals, our experiences, because similarity reduces uncertainty. When someone thinks like us, they feel easier to understand, they feel safer, they feel familiar, and our brain often interprets that comfort as attraction. Imagine meeting someone who has completely different beliefs, completely different interests, and completely different ways of seeing the world. That difference can be interesting, It can even be exciting, but it also creates distance. You have to work harder to understand them. You have to constantly adjust your perspective. Now compare that to someone who naturally understands your references, someone who laughs at the same things, someone who sees the world in a similar way. The connection often feels effortless. But there's another layer to this. Sometimes we don't just connect with people because of who they are. We connect because of what they represent. We see qualities in someone that we admire, and we become attracted to the feeling they create inside us. For example, someone who is confident may attract people who wish they felt more confident. Someone who is calm may attract people who want more peace in their own lives. Someone who is adventurous may attract people who want to escape routine. The person becomes a symbol, not just a person. This is why attraction can sometimes reveal something about ourselves. The people we admire often tell us something about what we value, what we desire, what we feel we are missing. Sometimes a crush is not only about, I like this person. Sometimes it is also, I like what this person represents. However, this is also where attraction can become misleading. Because when we recognize parts of ourselves in someone, we may start assuming the rest. We see one similarity and our brain begins creating a complete picture. Someone likes the same music as us, so we assume they understand us. Someone shares our humor, so we assume they have the same values. Someone has the same goals, so we assume they will treat us the way we hope. But similarity is only the beginning. Two people can enjoy the same things and still be completely different. This is why some connections feel intense very quickly. A person appears to match us perfectly. They seem familiar. They seem like someone who finally understands us. But sometimes what we are attracted to is not the person themselves, but the version of them we created in our mind. The healthiest attraction happens when curiosity replaces assumption. Instead of thinking, this person is exactly like me, we ask, who are they really? Because real connection is not built from finding an identical copy of yourself. It's built from understanding another person while still allowing them to be different. Attraction often begins with recognition, a feeling of, you understand me. But the next psychological force changes the way we see people completely. Because sometimes one single trait can influence our entire perception of someone, a trait that can make us believe a person is better than they actually are. And that is where the halo effect begins. Have you ever met someone and immediately thought they seem like a good person? Maybe they were attractive, maybe they were confident, maybe they spoke well, maybe they carried themselves in a way that made them stand out. But here's the interesting question. How much did you actually know about them? Because sometimes we make conclusions about people long before we have enough information to make those judgments. And this happens because of something called the halo effect. The halo effect is a psychological bias where one positive trait influences how we see everything else about a person. One quality creates a halo around them, and once that halo exists, we start viewing the person through it. For example, someone who is physically attractive may be judged as more intelligent, more confident, more successful, more trustworthy, even when there is no actual evidence that these things are true. The brain fills in the blanks. This happens because the brain wants things to make sense. We don't like having incomplete information. When we see one positive quality, our mind often tries to create a complete picture. A person looks confident, so we assume they are capable. A person speaks calmly, so we assume they are wise. A person is attractive, so we assume they have other desirable traits. The problem is, those assumptions might feel natural, but they are still assumptions. The halo effect is one reason first impressions are so powerful. Before someone even speaks, our brain is already collecting information. Their appearance, their body language, their clothing, their expression, their confidence. And within seconds, we start forming an opinion. Not because we carefully analyze them, but because our brain is constantly trying to predict who people are. This can also work in the opposite direction. A person who appears awkward, nervous, or different may be judged unfairly. Someone who struggles to communicate may be seen as less intelligent. Someone who doesn't fit a certain image may be underestimated, even though those traits might have nothing to do with their actual character. The halo effect doesn't only create positive assumptions, it can also create negative ones. This is especially interesting when it comes to attraction, because attraction itself can strengthen the halo effect. When we like someone, our brain becomes more likely to notice the things that support our feelings. Their flaws become smaller, their strengths become bigger. Things that might seem annoying in someone else suddenly become charming. A habit becomes cute, a mistake becomes endearing, a personality trait becomes something special. This is why people often say love is blind, because attraction can change perception. It doesn't mean our feelings are fake. It means our brain is filtering reality through emotion. We are not always seeing someone exactly as they are. We are seeing them through the meaning we have attached to them. Think about a celebrity. Many people admire someone they have never met. They see interviews, photos, performances, small pieces of their personality, and from those pieces they create a complete image. They might think, they seem kind, they seem humble, they seem like someone I would get along with. But the reality is, they know a carefully presented version of that person. The brain creates the rest. This is also why attraction can disappear when someone becomes more familiar. At first, the halo effect may make someone seem almost perfect, but as we learn more about them, the illusion becomes weaker. We begin seeing the full person, their strengths, their weaknesses, their contradictions. And that's when we find out whether the attraction was based on reality or an image. Understanding the halo effect does not mean we should stop being attracted to people. It simply means we should become aware of how our minds work. Because attraction is powerful, and when attraction is combined with assumptions, we can accidentally fall in love with an idea instead of a person. But there is another reason attraction can feel so intense. Sometimes it isn't because someone is familiar or because they are similar to us. Sometimes it is because we don't fully understand them. And the human brain has a strange relationship with uncertainty. Because sometimes, the things we cannot fully understand are the things we want to understand the most. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the person you know the least about can become the person you think about the most? A stranger, someone you only had a short conversation with, someone who appeared interesting but distant, someone you feel like you want to understand. And the strange thing is, sometimes the mystery itself becomes part of the attraction. Humans are naturally curious. When we have complete information, our brain feels satisfied. The question is answered. The uncertainty disappears. But when something is incomplete, our mind wants to finish the story. This is why unanswered questions stay in our thoughts, why unfinished tasks bother us, why we replay conversations, why we wonder, what did they really mean? What are they actually like? What would happen if I knew them better? This same mechanism can influence attraction. When someone reveals everything about themselves immediately, there is less room for imagination. But when someone is harder to read, our brain starts working. We begin looking for clues, a small smile, a certain reaction, the way they speak, the things they don't say. And because our brain is trying to understand them, we spend more mental energy thinking about them. This is why mystery can feel exciting, not because uncertainty is always good, but because uncertainty creates curiosity, and curiosity creates attention. The more we wonder about someone, the more space they occupy in our mind. However, this is where attraction can become confusing, because sometimes we are not attracted to the person. We are attracted to the mystery. We are attracted to the possibility. We are attracted to the version of them that exists in our imagination. Think about having a crush on someone you barely know. Maybe you see them often, you notice small details, you create theories about their personality, you imagine conversations, you imagine what they would be like in different situations. But most of that relationship is happening inside your own mind. You are not responding to the complete person, you are responding to the limited information you have, and your brain is filling in the rest. This is why mystery can sometimes make people seem more interesting than they really are. The unknown gives our imagination room to work, and imagination has a powerful ability to create perfection. Because when we don't know someone's flaws, we don't have to confront them. We only see the pieces that caught our attention. This is also why some people become less attractive once we get closer to them. Not because they became worse, but because the mystery disappeared. The person became real, the unknown became known, and the fantasy was replaced by reality. But mystery itself is not a bad thing. In healthy relationships, mystery turns into curiosity. Instead of creating an imaginary version of someone, we become interested in discovering who they actually are. The goal is not to keep someone distant forever. The goal is to have enough curiosity to keep learning. Because attraction often starts with a question: who is this person? But connection begins when we are willing to discover the answer. This brings us to an important difference. Attraction can make us notice someone. It can create excitement. It can create curiosity. But attraction alone does not tell us whether someone is truly good for us. Because the person who catches your attention is not always the person who brings you peace. And that is where we reach the final part of attraction. what actually lasts. Attraction is powerful. It can make someone stand out in a crowded room. It can make a normal conversation feel important. It can make us think about someone long after we leave. But attraction has a limitation. It can tell us who catches our attention, but it cannot always tell us who belongs in our life. A person can be exciting. They can be mysterious. They can feel familiar. They can even seem perfect. But those things alone do not create a lasting connection, because the same psychological forces that create attraction can also create illusions. Familiarity can make someone feel close before we truly know them. Similarity can make someone feel like they understand us before we have experienced real compatibility. The halo effect can make someone appear better than they are. Mystery can make us fall in love with a version of someone that exists only in our imagination. But this doesn't mean attraction is fake. It means attraction is only the beginning. A spark can start a connection, but it cannot maintain one by itself. Long-lasting relationships are usually built on things that become clear over time. Trust, respect, understanding, emotional safety, shared values, the ability to communicate when things become difficult. Because eventually, every illusion fades, the mystery disappears, the first impression becomes normal, the excitement becomes routine, and what remains is the actual person. This is why truly knowing someone matters. Not just knowing the version they show at their best, not just knowing the qualities that attracted you, but knowing their flaws, their fears, their habits, their struggles, and still being able to appreciate who they are. There is a difference between being attracted to someone and actually seeing someone. Attraction often begins with, I like what I see, but connection develops into, I understand who you are. The interesting thing is that the strongest relationships often contain the same elements that created attraction in the beginning. Familiarity becomes comfort. Similarity becomes understanding. Mystery becomes curiosity. The halo effect becomes appreciation based on reality instead of assumption. The things that once created excitement become something deeper. And maybe that is the most important part of understanding attraction. It helps us recognize that our feelings are not random. They come from patterns, from experiences, from the way our minds interpret the world around us. Understanding these patterns doesn't remove the magic from attraction. It simply allows us to see it more clearly. Because attraction is not just about finding someone interesting. It is about understanding why they became interesting in the first place. Sometimes we are attracted to what feels familiar. Sometimes we are attracted to what reflects ourselves. Sometimes we are attracted to what we don't understand. But the relationships that last are the ones where curiosity becomes understanding and attraction becomes genuine connection. Thus, the mind is constantly searching for people who feel meaningful. But the challenge is learning the difference between someone who simply captures your attention and someone who truly deserves it.
If you enjoyed today's video, you might want to consider hitting the like button and sharing it to others. Subscribe as well while you're at it, for good luck. Additionally, if you're interested, why not check these videos I handpicked just for you? And as always, stay curious.